All right, guys, this is the third part of my Sunday morning meeting or video. And if you've just watched the first two, you've heard a little bit about yesterday into the early evening. Then I met a great gentleman named Brian who took the time to get together with me and share some stories. And usually when I talk to folks, it's usually one prevailing topic and story comes out. And the thing that struck me with Brian, and maybe it struck me because one of my dear friends, Adam, who was the very first person I talked to about this idea that I'm going to take this journey and ask for support with some media ability, as an adoptive parent that went through something of a tough adoption. And Brian and his wife married over 30 years. I also haven't had 4 miscarriages, know all the stress and angst that goes along with trying to have a baby, and financially and emotionally and all that stuff. So when you adopt, most people just don't wake up and say, I want to adopt. They try to conceive on their own for a while, and so having had 4 failed uh, births, deliveries, 4 failed pregnancies is the word I want to use. I'm sorry. Personally, I understand that part of it, and then to hear that he's adopted 2 beautiful kids goes back to my friend. And Brian is and another thing. So anyway, Brian met me at the hotel, and there was a music I don't want to say festival in town. There was a music fair in town. And he said, let's head over there. And it was early evening, and the heat had kind of dissipated. It wasn't really crowded, and a lot of it had to do with some of the heat. But it was a couple of things that struck me. So while I was there, I met a few folks. The band was playing. Brian and I were talking. But some of the conversation that took place was there to talk about. I guess I don't know if it was just someone speaking or if it was part of what the was raising funds for. But it was dealing with mental health issues. And as I said, one of the things that spurred me onto this journey was being involved with somebody who, for years, in my opinion, not my opinion now, but had some issues. And for 45 years of my life, I never dealt with anybody with it. So it was kind of new to me, and it was really tough and draining. And one of the things that I learned just prior to this journey and going forward is that, there's a certain acceptance. And one of the things that helped me get past some of the pain and even anger from being steamrolled so many times was accepting that fact. If somebody had cancer that they didn't ask for, and at times the medication would make them behave a certain way, I would be accepting of that a little, and society would be accepting of that, right? The society knows you have cancer. Everybody's praying for you, and there's not anybody that's looking at you with any condemnation or putting a stigma on you, and so forth. But yet, mental illness, to some degree, I think for years people looked at it not with condemnation, but with judgment. And what I had to come to realize was accepting that mental illness, at least with the folks that I've come to know, they didn't ask for it. It's something that, and it's hard for them, and this was my situation. It's hard for the person to own it. If you had cancer, she would have no problem saying, look, I got cancer, I'm going to beat this thing. But not a lot of people trumpet the cause that, hey, I have this issue, and I don't control it. I don't have any, I didn't ask for it. I just have it. And that's a big, strong person that could, no matter what size they are, it's a huge, strong person that can stand up and say, yeah, I have this and I own this. And that's some of what was happening at the festival or the fair. And it was really impressive to me that it was talked about out in the open. I kind of wish I had given my card to the folks and said, maybe I can kind of give them, I want this to be a platform for education. We've talked about Asperger's. We talked about somebody needing a transplant and some educational with that. We've talked about a few different topics on here and so forth. But the music being kind of loud, Brian and I weren't, really able to converse, that well. So we said, come on, let's go into town and let's get something to eat and talk for a while. And he shared with me the story of his 2 adopted children, and and how it came to be. And there were different points of it that I thought were, really telling. Um, the way the adoptions went relatively smoothly, which my friends, the adoption went smoothly, but the challenge afterward was an issue. And that's another story for another time. I'm sure he'll tell it if he wants, if he'd like to. Um, but Brian, and I think his wife's name is Laura. I didn't meet her yet. Their youngest son has had some issues, and they were trying to determine what it was. And finally, they did some testing just a few years ago and find out that he has fetal alcohol syndrome, and that's something that affects the brain in the womb, and you develop a little bit slower, and so you're not quite developed in the way a typical brain would work, and it was presenting some challenges for the family. And they've got him on some medication, and Brian was saying some things that just made complete sense. He was on the medication, but it only lasts so long, and then with the long school day, in the morning it might be not every day, but it might be tough, and then by the end of the day, and certainly there's been some challenges with it, and it always takes I always admire people, because I don't know that I could be a foster parent or an adoptive parent. I don't know that I could or couldn't. I think it's they're special people, and it was just really great sharing that part with Brian and his honesty with me. We talked about some of the challenges and trying to have it, and how emotionally and financially it could be very taxing. Again, Brian had a really nice story too, a decent outcome with this. That apparently the birth mother of his two children has a daughter older than the two, I think a younger one, and I maybe even think another younger one. So the nice part of the story was, I guess, Brian and his wife got a call one day. His wife got a note, I think through Facebook, from a young lady that said, I think that I might be the sister of your two boys, and just didn't know if they knew, if they were interested in getting to know me, and any of those things. So Brian and Laura basically said, look, when they're 18, they can decide to certainly do whatever they want to do. We can kind of mention it to them, and that started to progress. And then all of a sudden, I guess at his oldest son's high school graduation, they had invited this young lady, and she came and met the family. So at least these two gentlemen know that they have a sister out there. And she was with the birth mom till she was 18, and she got out on her own, and she has a couple of kids, and a few kids, maybe 3, and so they got to meet extended parts of the family that they didn't know before, and that could always be a hit or miss. And so it's kind of a really nice positive story to that. But then there's the socio thought part of this, and thought process. So that got me to thinking. Brian was mentioning how it takes a very strong person to be able to have a child, take it to term, give birth to a child. Brian was sharing how when she gave birth, his wife was actually in the delivery room, and how one of the things I couldn't even imagine was, it was almost, I don't want to say they were campaigning, but they have to write it when it's through an attorney like that, and it's kind of preset. The mother had a choice of where to, there were parents in need of a child or wanting a child, and they all had to kind of write a letter to the mother saying who we are and what we do, and here's what we stand for. So, that's a tough letter to write to begin with. So you write this letter, and then now you submit it, and it's like any other kind of application for college or a loan. You sit there with your fingers crossed, and you don't know. And this young lady chose Brian and Laura, so Laura was in the delivery room at the birth, which is pretty amazing. But the socio part of it, as I said, as Brian was talking, that to take a baby to term and give birth, and then to have the strength, courage, and fortitude to say, you know what, I'm not equipped. I don't have the facilities to care for this baby they want to. I'm going to do what might be the greatest love of all. Instead of being selfish and trying to take this baby on, um, I'm going to let this baby be loved by people that can love it in a manner that I can't. And there's no doubt in the world that that might be the ultimate sign of love. And I know I've never been adopted. I've never had an adopted child. I know sometimes that's a hard thing for them. And but I think if you can see it that way, if you want to kind of question why your birth mom or dad, put you up for adoption, I mean, think about it from that perspective. It certainly can't be easy at all. And what a great gift that they were able to give you, and how strong of love did that have to be. And then again, that brings me back to the socio. So, how does society look differently at different folks? You have a mother that has 4 or 5 children and chooses to keep those 4 or 5 children and does the best they possibly can to provide and do everything they can. They may need to reach out for assistance from the government, welfare, and I think there's a certain part of society that looks and says, hey, sister, stop having kids here. You know what I'm saying? If you can't take care of them or can't afford to, stop asking the government to support, your family, basically. And like I said, there's a certain part of society that thinks that way. There's a certain part that doesn't. But yet, then you have somebody like this young lady that's had, from what I can tell, 5 children, and has raised just one of them, and she puts them up for adoption. We look differently upon that person as, providing gifts to people. 4 families got to adopt these kids, or at least more than one family, because they can adopt multiple kids. So I don't know the answer, and I don't know how anybody else looks at it, and I question myself, do I look at them differently? I don't know if I do or not. Again, one of the things I'm trying to do is just give you people, let you inside my mind a little bit and ask yourself questions. And that's what I think pointing the thumb is ask the why. Ask, why do I think that way? Why do I feel that way? Could I have said something different? Should I have said something different? That's kind of, just telling me in my mind, is one to be applauded, the other not? Or both to be applauded, or both to be, hey, you know what? Sister, just because you're letting them get adopted doesn't mean that you're doing any kind of service. Slow down, whatever it might be. So that's a little bit about yesterday. I met with Brian. Like I said, it was drop me back off. I got to get a good night's sleep. I'm sitting here rambling for almost 45 minutes now in these videos, so I'm going to shut it off now. Have a great day, guys. Lane and Kira, Grace, I love you guys so much. Can't wait to talk to you later. I got to catch up. I got a bunch of messages while I was on the phone here, and I'll start posting these. So love you guys. Thank you to Plymouth. I think I may end up trying to stick around today and see where we go, but I'll let you know. Thanks, guys. Love yous.